Now we move to Part 4 of the FSSC 22000 scheme. Part 4 is specifically written for certification bodies. In simple terms, this part explains what a CB must do before it is allowed to provide FSSC 22000 certification services, how it must maintain its license, and how it must demonstrate competence and integrity to the foundation. The first amendment to notice is in the meaning of scheme requirements. In version 6, the scheme requirements referred to the FSSC 22000 scheme, ISO/IEC 170211, ISO 22003-1-2022, and the Board of Stakeholders decision list. In version 7, scheme interpretation articles are added into this framework. This is important because interpretation articles are no longer something a CB can treat as optional reading. They must be considered in CB procedures, technical reviews, audit planning, and certification decision controls. Next, version 7 updates the licensing language. It clearly states that the CB shall hold accreditation for ISO 22000-2018. This looks like a small wording change, but it is practically important because it removes ambiguity around the exact ISO 22000 version linked with the scheme. The next change is about provisional status. Under provisional status, a CB may be allowed to issue unaccredited certificates while it is working towards accreditation. Version 7 makes this more traceable. Unaccredited certificates issued under provisional status have to be registered in the assurance platform. After accreditation is obtained, these may be replaced with accredited certificates according to the applicable AB requirements. So the main V7 message is provisional certification activity must be visible and controlled through the platform. The communication responsibility of the CB is also stronger in version 7. The CB must have the right contact structure for the foundation. This includes a contact for the FSSC assurance platform, a person responsible for managing the integrity program, and a representative for mandatory FSSC events. The CB must also communicate important changes, such as accreditation changes, serious integrity events, or situations that may affect the credibility of the scheme. For trainees, explain this simply. Version 7 expects the CB to be more responsive, more connected to the foundation, and more transparent when something material changes. So the practical takeaway from this slide is that Part 4 in version 7 is not only about being licensed. It is about controlled licensing, platform visibility, timely communication, and stronger integration of FSSC interpretation requirements into the CB management system. This slide explains two connected changes: the responsibilities of the certification body and the competence of the people working inside the CB system. In version 6, the CB had responsibilities to comply with the scheme, participate in the integrity program, and maintain certification controls. Version 7 keeps those expectations, but makes data quality much more explicit. The CB is now clearly responsible for ensuring that all scheme-related data in the assurance platform is complete, up-to-date, accurate, and aligned with the scheme requirements. This is a major practical change. In the past, some people may have treated platform entries as a back-office activity. Version 7 makes it clear that data quality is part of certification integrity. If an auditor profile is outdated, if certificate information is incomplete, if audit information is not uploaded correctly, or if platform data does not match the actual certification status, this can affect trust in the whole certification process. The slide also refers to annual performance reporting. Version 7 requires CBs to submit performance reports to the foundation, and the minimum content is specified and communicated by the foundation. The idea is that the foundation can monitor CB performance more consistently, not only through complaints or one-off reviews, but through structured performance information. Now look at the competence change. Version 6 required competence processes and records. Version 7 strengthens this by saying that training and competence review records must be maintained and provided to the foundation on request. So for a CB, having competent people is not enough. The CB must also be able to show evidence quickly when the foundation asks for it. Version 7 also broadens mandatory training. It is not limited only to auditors. It applies to relevant CB personnel involved in certification functions, technical experts, witnessers, FSSC scheme managers, auditors, and also personnel working on the assurance platform. This is very important because certification quality depends on the complete chain. If the auditor is competent but the technical reviewer, platform handler, or scheme manager is not updated, the system can still fail. The training message for this slide is simple. Version 7 treats competence and data accuracy as direct parts of certification integrity. CBs must therefore update their training matrix, competence records, platform responsibilities, and internal review procedures. This slide focuses on 3 important competence roles inside the certification body: the technical reviewer, the technical expert, and the auditor. First, let us understand the technical reviewer and certification decision maker. In any accredited certification process, the auditor does not simply audit and then issue the certificate. There is a technical review and a certification decision process. Version 7 adds a clearer general requirement around these functions. The technical reviewer and the certification decision maker must be trained in the CB's technical review and certification decision process. This process should include peer review, formal sign-off or approval, and ongoing review of competence. This is an important V7 strengthening. It means the CB must not rely only on experience or job title. It must have a controlled process for how reviewers and decision makers are trained, approved, checked, and maintained. This reduces the risk of weak certification decisions. Second, look at technical experts. Under version 6, technical experts were approved mainly at subcategory level. Version 7 brings in the new sub-subcategory structure from Table 1.1. So, where applicable, the technical expert must now show competence not only for the broad category or subcategory, but also for the relevant sub-subcategory. For example, within packaging, plastics, paper, metal, glass, and other packaging materials may require different technical knowledge. Within ambient stable foods, thermal processing and dry ingredients may require different process understanding. Version 7 uses the subcategory structure to make this more precise. Another practical point is that if a technical expert is used, the CB must ensure that the expert is registered on the assurance platform as part of the audit team, with the correct role. Version 7 also expects the CB to maintain evidence of the expert's approval. This is not just a name added to a report. It must be supported by competence evidence. Third, the slide refers to the auditor qualification process. Version 7 states that all FSSC 22000 auditors, including auditors in training, must be registered in the FSSC assurance platform, and their profiles must be kept up to date. This is a strong digital control. It allows the foundation and CB to verify whether the auditor is approved for the correct scope, whether their information is current, and whether their competence is aligned with the audit being assigned. The main message for trainees is that V7 moves from broad competence to traceable, role-specific, platform-linked competence. The CB must prove that the right person is performing the right certification function for the right technical scope. This slide is one of the most important Part 4 slides because it explains how auditor training must change from version 6 to version 7. In version 6, auditor training included ISO 22000, food defense, food fraud, FSSC scheme requirements, accreditation requirements, and training in the relevant PRP standards. The PRP standards in V6 were based on the old ISO TS 22002 series and PAS 221, depending on the category. For example, food manufacturing used ISO TS 22002-1, catering used ISO TS 22002-2, packaging used ISO TS 22002-4, transport and storage used ISO TS 22002-5, feed used ISO TS 22002-6, and retail wholesale used PAS 221. Version 7 changes the PRP backbone. The auditor must now be trained in ISO 22002-100 and the relevant ISO 22002 parts, ISO 22002-1, ISO 22002-2, ISO 22002-4, ISO 22002-5, ISO 22002-6, and ISO 22002-7, depending on the category being audited. This is not just a reference change. The auditor must understand how the new common PRP standard and sector-specific parts work together. Version 7 also makes current scheme version training and harmonization program training more explicit. This matters because FSSC relies on consistent interpretation across certification bodies. Without harmonized training, two auditors may interpret the same requirement differently. Version 7 tries to reduce this by making foundation-defined training part of the competence structure. Now focus on the packaging auditor qualification change. Category I auditors now have more detailed qualification pathways. Version 7 expects strong knowledge in packaging technology and related topics, such as packaging principles, packaging legislation, materials manufacturing, packaging for food and feed products, quality and food safety control, testing, printing processes, printing inks, recycling, and design of packaging materials. This is a significant amendment because packaging is not only a supporting material. Packaging can affect food safety through migration, contamination, labeling, printing ink, and material suitability. Version 7 recognizes this by strengthening the competence route for packaging auditors. The practical message for CBs is clear. Update auditor training records, update the training matrix, replace old ISO TS and past PRP references, and make sure each auditor has training aligned to the V7 category and sub-subcategory scope they are approved for.
For example, an auditor approved for ambient stable foods may still need specific competence for thermal processing, dried ingredients, beverages, or bakery and confectionery, depending on the actual scope. Similarly, a packaging auditor may need competence for plastics, paper and board, metal, glass, or other packaging materials. The aim is to match auditor competence with the actual risk and technology of the site being audited. Let's review the changes in Part 3 concerning reporting time, rounding, and minimum audit duration. First, regarding reporting time, which is detailed in Section 4.3.1.2. Under Version 6, the requirement was a minimum of 1.0 auditor day for reporting. Version 7 retains the requirement of at least 1.0 auditor day, but introduces flexibility for shorter audits. Specifically, 0.5 day is permitted where the calculated and delivered audit duration was 1.5 auditor days. This provides more proportionality for shorter engagements. Next, we look at the changes to rounding in Section 4.3.1. Version 6 required the final duration to be rounded up to the nearest half day. Version 7 now mandates that the audit duration must be rounded up to the nearest quarter day, or 0.25 day. This change allows for more precise audit duration calculation. Finally, let's cover the minimum audit duration in Section 4.3.3. Previously, Version 6 required a minimum of 2 days for all audit types. Version 7 updates this, stating that the minimum may be 1.5, 2, or 2.5 days, depending on the specifics set by the FSSC. A critical exception is that audit categories C, D, and K must never be less than 2 days. The updated process for determining duration involves 3 steps. First, the FSSC sets the initial base duration. Second, you apply the minimum duration, ensuring C, D, and K are not below 2 days. And third, you round the final duration to the nearest 0.25 day. This slide looks at what happens after an auditor has already been approved. Approval is not permanent unless competence is maintained. Version 7 strengthens the way auditor maintenance and disqualification are handled. The general expectation remains that each auditor must maintain active FSSC auditing experience. Version 7 explains what happens when an auditor cannot meet the required annual number of FSSC audits. Instead of leaving this unclear, V7 introduces a temporary exemption arrangement. This exemption is not automatic. It can be applied only in specific cases, such as extended leave, lack of clients in the region or country, or a serious event. The CB must justify the exemption and mark the auditor in the assurance platform as working under a temporary exemption arrangement. This is important because the Foundation can see that the auditor is not simply being treated as fully active without explanation. The exemption also has limits. If the conditions are not met, or if the exemption cannot be granted, the auditor must be disqualified. This strengthens consistency between CBs. It prevents a situation where one CB keeps an inactive auditor approved without enough evidence, while another CB follows stricter rules. The second point on this slide is about disqualified auditors. Under Version 6, there were requirements for requalifying a disqualified auditor, including additional training or calibration, a successful witness audit, and a new approval document. Version 7 adds an important tracking detail. The requalification anniversary date is reset based on the date of requalification. This means the new competence cycle starts from the date the auditor is requalified, not from the original qualification date. This may look small, but it matters for database control and future witness audit planning.
If the CB uses the old anniversary date, it may create confusion in maintenance timelines. Version 7 expects the CB to update its auditor register and tracking system correctly. The main message for this slide is version 7 makes auditor maintenance more transparent. It gives a controlled route for temporary exceptions, but it also makes disqualification and requalification tracking clearer and stricter. In next module, we will cover changes in the requirements of the accreditation body.